There is one voice that, once heard, is never forgotten. A voice that could seduce, terrify, and charm an audience within the same sentence. It belonged to an English schoolboy who once sang in a choir, who lost his father before he was even a teenager, and who somehow, against every expectation, became one of the most instantly recognizable performers in the history of American popular culture. This is the story of how a quiet child from Cheshire became Frank-N-Furter, became Pennywise, became a voice heard by millions of children who never even knew his face. This is the story of Tim Curry. Timothy James Curry was born on April 19, 1946, in the small village of Grappenhall, in Cheshire, England. His father, James Curry, was a Royal Navy chaplain, a Methodist minister, who had met his future wife, Patricia, in Malta, and the two were married in Egypt. Curry had one older sibling, a sister named Judith, who would later become an accomplished concert pianist. Because his father served in the Navy, the family's life was shaped by movement rather than permanence. Within a year of his birth, the Currys relocated to Hong Kong, following his father's naval postings, before eventually settling for a significant stretch of his childhood in Plymouth, a port city on England's southern coast, itself deeply tied to naval life. As a boy, Curry displayed an early gift for music. He became a talented boy soprano, singing in choirs during a childhood that, on the surface, followed the predictable rhythms of a British military family. But that stability was broken in 1958, when Curry was only 12 years old. His father died of pneumonia, a loss that reshaped the family's path entirely. Following his father's death, Patricia Curry moved the family to South London, where young Tim was enrolled in boarding school. He would later attend Kingswood School in Bath, Somerset, remaining there until he was 18. Losing a parent so young, and adjusting to boarding school life so soon afterward, marked a formative and difficult chapter, one that would quietly shape the resilience Curry carried into adulthood. It was during these years of change that Curry's interest in performance began to take a more serious shape. Acting offered him something that ordinary life did not, the chance to become someone else entirely. Decades later, reflecting on why the craft had always excited him, Curry described it simply as the freedom of being somebody else. That instinct, discovered somewhere between choir stalls and boarding school stages, would define the rest of his life. After finishing school, Curry chose to pursue that passion formally, enrolling at the University of Birmingham, where he pursued a combined Bachelor of Arts degree in English and drama. He graduated in 1968, a young man with a degree in literature and performance, and no clear map of what came next. What came next arrived almost immediately. In 1968, the same year he graduated, Curry landed his first professional acting role, joining the original London cast of the musical Hair, playing the role of Wolf. It was an extraordinary way to begin a career, stepping into one of the most talked about and boundary-pushing musicals of its era, right at the moment counterculture theater was reshaping the West End. But the true significance of Hair for Curry's future would not become clear until years later. It was during this production that he crossed paths with a fellow performer named Richard O'Brien, a member of the show's touring company. Neither of them could have known, at the time, that this early professional connection would soon alter the course of both their careers. By the early 1970s, Richard O'Brien had written a strange glam rock-infused musical, a tribute to the low-budget science fiction and horror films he had loved as a child, blending gothic camp with rock and roll theateristics. That musical was the Rocky Horror Show, and when it needed someone to embody its central character, the flamboyant transgressive mad scientist Dr. Frank-N-Furter, O'Brien turned to the actor he had met in Hair. In 1973, the Rocky Horror Show opened in a small 63-seat theater space in London, and Curry stepped into the role that would define, and in some ways haunt, the rest of his career. He didn't play Frank-N-Furter as a joke. He played the character with total commitment, blending menace, seduction, and vulnerability into a performance that felt genuinely dangerous, genuinely magnetic. Audiences had never seen anything quite like it. The production's success led to a Los Angeles staging in 1974 and a Broadway transfer in 1975, with Curry reprising the role each time. And then came a decision to bring the story to film. Directed by Jim Sharman, who had also directed the original stage production, the Rocky Horror Picture Show was released in 1975. Its initial theatrical run was, by nearly every conventional measure, a failure. Audiences stayed away. Critics were divided. For a brief period, it looked as though the film might simply disappear. But something unexpected happened. Midnight screenings began appearing in individual theaters, first as a novelty, then as a ritual. Audiences began dressing as the characters, reciting lines back at the screen, transforming a passive viewing experience into an interactive event unlike anything American cinema has seen before. What had once looked like a box office disappointment slowly became one of the most enduring cult phenomena in the history of film, still screamed in theaters decades later, still drawing new generations of fans who had not even been born when it was first released. For Curry personally, the role was both a launching pad and, at times, a shadow. Frankenfurter made him famous, almost overnight, an unmistakable, era-defining performance, built on fishnets, corsetry, and an aristocratic sneer delivered in Curry's. But it also meant that for years afterward, audiences and casting directors alike struggled to see him as anything else. Curry's response to that challenge was not to run from the theater that had made him, but to keep proving, role after role, just how wide his range truly was. In 1975, the same year the Rocky Horror film was released, Curry also appeared in Travesties, playing the Dadaist writer Tristan Tzara in both its West End and Broadway productions, a role built on wit and intellect rather than horror or spectacle. 5 years later, in 1980, Curry took on one of the most demanding roles of his stage career, playing the title role of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart in the original Broadway production of Amadeus. It was a performance that earned him his first Tony Award nomination, cementing his reputation as a serious dramatic actor capable of anchoring a major production far removed from glam rock camp. He would go on to earn additional Tony nominations across his career, along with 2 Laurence Olivier Award nominations in Britain, evidence of the stage career that stretched across decades and continents, and that critics on both sides of the Atlantic took seriously. Alongside his stage and screen work, Curry also pursued a career in music. Between 1978 and 1981, he released 3 studio albums, Read My Lips, Fearless, and Simplicity, touring with his own band across the United States and Europe. It was another dimension of a restless creative identity, an actor who was equally comfortable behind a microphone as behind a script. By the mid-1980s, Curry had firmly established himself in Hollywood, and it was here that his particular gift for villainy reached new heights. In 1982, he played the conniving Rooster Hannigan in the film adaptation of Annie. Then, in 1985, he took on 2 roles that would showcase his range within a single year. In Ridley Scott's dark fantasy epic Legend, Curry played Darkness, the towering horned Lord of Darkness, a demonic villain rendered almost unrecognizable beneath hours of prosthetic makeup each day, opposite a young Tom Cruise. That same year he shifted entirely in tone, playing Wadsworth, the sharp-tongued butler, at the center of the ensemble mystery comedy, Clue, a role that would go on to become one of his most beloved performances, admired for its rapid-fire delivery and impeccable comic timing. Curry's talent for portraying menace, without ever losing precision or intelligence, made him one of the most sought-after character actors of his generation. In 1990, he appeared in The Hunt for Red October, proving he could anchor a tense, prestige political thriller just as easily as a horror film or a comedy. And that same year, he took on the role that would rival even Frankenfurter in cultural impact. Cast as Pennywise the Dancing Clown in the television adaptation of Stephen King's It, Curry delivered a performance that reshaped the horror genre's relationship with clowns for an entire generation. He brought both playful theatrality and genuine dread to the role, a combination so effective that his interpretation of Pennywise became, for millions of viewers, the definitive nightmare image of childhood fear. Referenced and remembered decades later, even after subsequent adaptations of King's novel, the years that followed showed just how far Curry's range extended beyond horror. In 1992, he charmed audiences as the eccentric hotel concierge in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, a family comedy blockbuster that introduced him to an entirely new younger audience. In 1993, he played Cardinal Richelieu in The Three Musketeers, bringing his signature blend of intelligence and menace to a swashbuckling adventure film. And in 1996, he took on perhaps his most joyfully theatrical role of the decade, playing Long John Silver in Muppet Treasure Island, sharing the screen with Jim Henson's puppets in a performance full of warmth, comic energy, and unmistakable star power. It was also during these years that Curry became one of the most prolific and respected voices in animation. His voice acting career began in earnest with his performance as Captain Hook in the 1990 series Peter Pan and the Pirates, a role that earned him a Daytime Emmy Award, one of the most significant honors of his career. He went on to voice Hexus, the pollution-born villain in Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, King Chicken in the animated series Duckman, and, perhaps most beloved of all to an entire generation of American children, Sir Nigel Thornberry, the eccentric British nature documentarian, on Nickelodeon's The Wild Thornberrys, a role he voiced from 1998 to 2004. For many young viewers who had never seen Rocky Horror or It, Curry's voice, warm, theatrical, unmistakably British, was simply the sound of Saturday morning television. In 2005, Curry returned to the stage in a role that felt, in many ways, like a culmination of everything he had built across his career. He originated the role of King Arthur in Spamalot, the Monty Python musical adaptation that became one of Broadway's biggest hits of the decade. His performance combined the comic absurdity of Python's humor with the regal command of a trained classical stage actor, earning him yet another Tony Award nomination. He continued in the role through its West End transfer, delighting audiences in London just as he had once done as Frank Henfurter more than 3 decades earlier. Even as he approached his mid-60s, Curry continued taking on memorable roles. In 2010, he delivered what would become one of his final major live-action performances, appearing as a serial killer nicknamed the Prince of Darkness in an episode of Criminal Minds, a chilling, tightly controlled performance that reminded audiences why he remained one of television's most reliably unsettling guest stars. That same year, he appeared in the film Burke and Hare, his final theatrical film role before everything in his life changed. In the summer of 2012, at the age of 67, Tim Curry suffered a massive stroke. According to accounts he later shared, he was receiving a massage at the time and did not initially realize anything was wrong. It was the person giving him the massage who noticed the warning signs and insisted on calling for emergency help. Curry was rushed to the hospital, where surgeons operated to remove blood clots from his brain, an operation so severe that, in his own later account, described in his memoir, it required significant intervention to his skull to save his life. The stroke left him unable to speak for weeks. The left side of his body was paralyzed. He would use a wheelchair for the remainder of his life. The recovery that followed was slow and, by Curry's own count in later interviews, deeply difficult. He described relearning how to speak as one of the most disorienting experiences of his life, comparing the search for his own voice to searching for something that had simply vanished. He also spoke candidly about ongoing short-term memory challenges that persisted for years afterward. Yet what defined Curry's response to this crisis was not resignation but persistence. Rather than retreating from public life, he shifted the focus of his career toward voice acting, work that did not require the physical demands his condition made difficult, and continued accepting roles throughout the 2010s, allowing his voice, still as rich and distinctive as ever, to keep reaching audiences even as his physical performing career necessarily slowed. In interviews given in late 2025, less than a year before his death, Curry spoke openly about the lasting impact of the stroke, revealing that he still could not use his left arm, that he required the assistance of caregivers, and that he had also been managing an abdominal aneurysm. Despite these ongoing health challenges, that same year he published his memoir, titled Vagabond, offering readers a candid look back at his life and career, including his own reflections on the stroke, his early years in the theater, and his often complicated relationship with the fame that Rocky Horror had brought him decades earlier. Remarkably, in 2026, 14 years after the stroke that had ended his film career, Curry returned to the big screen, taking a role in the independent horror film Streen. It marked his first feature film appearance in well over a decade, a comeback that surprised and delighted longtime fans, and one final demonstration of the determination that had carried him through everything since that terrifying night in 2012. Tim Curry died on August 25, 2026, passing away peacefully at his home in Toluca Lake, Los Angeles. His death was confirmed by his longtime manager and friend Marcia Hurlitz, who stated that he had continued adding to his achievements as an artist and, most recently, as a writer, right up until the end. He was 80 years old. A specific cause of death has not been publicly disclosed. He was survived by his niece and nephew, the children of his late sister Judith, who had passed away in 2001. Curry never married and had no children of his own. In the hours and days following the announcement, tributes poured in from across the entertainment industry. Fellow performers who had shared stages and screens with him spoke of his generosity, his professionalism, and the sheer force of his presence. Actor Michael McKean offered a simple, heartfelt tribute, saying that their blessing was to have had Tim Curry in their lives. Others recalled specific moments of kindness, mentorship, and inspiration, describing an actor who, despite decades of fame, remained patient and warm with younger performers working alongside him. What Tim Curry leaves behind is difficult to summarize, precisely because his career refused to be summarized during his lifetime. He was at once the seductive, gender-defying rock icon of a midnight movie phenomenon, and the terrifying clown who haunted a generation's nightmares. He was a Tony-nominated stage actor, equally at home playing Mozart, King Arthur, or a Dadaist poet, and a beloved children's television voice known to millions who never saw his face. He built, across more than 5 decades, one of the most genuinely versatile bodies of work in modern entertainment, moving fluidly between horror and comedy, villainy and warmth, stage and screen, live performance and animation, never allowing any single role, however iconic, to define the outer limits of what he could do. And after a stroke that would have ended most careers entirely, he chose again and again to keep working, to keep creating, to keep showing up for audiences who had grown up with his voice, whether they knew his name or not. From a small English village shaped by a naval chaplain father he lost too soon, to the West End stage, to Hollywood's most enduring cult classic, to the nightmares and joys of American living rooms for half a century. Tim Curry's journey was never predictable, and never anything less than unforgettable.